I watched my manager stand in front of the board, flashing a confident smile as he presented my invention as his own. They clapped. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a theft dressed in a tailored suit. 2 weeks ago, I stayed up 3 nights straight perfecting that patent. Now, I was invisible. But I wasn't done. I had already planted the seed of a quiet retaliation. He didn't know I recorded everything. He didn't know I'd registered the patent alone. And he sure as hell didn't know who I'd already contacted. You think I'm overreacting? No. This is me being patient. The hum of the fluorescent lights above had become background noise after hours of tinkering. My lab bench looked like a battlefield. Scattered diagrams, soldering tools, empty coffee cups. But tonight, something shifted. At 3:12 a.m., the prototype blinked its first light, consuming half the power it did yesterday. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My algorithm had worked. Quietly, I shut down the system, packed up my notes, and slipped out of the building. When I got home, the apartment was dark. I crept into my daughter's room, knelt by her bed, and kissed her forehead. She stirred slightly, muttering something about robots in her sleep. I smiled and whispered, "Daddy did it." The next morning, I shared the breakthrough with Greg Dawson, my manager. He was younger than most in his position, always impeccably dressed, with a voice that could sell sand in a desert. When I showed him the power consumption charts, his eyes widened, but his tone stayed smooth. "Jack, this is incredible," he said. "We need to loop in Dr. Adler. This is exactly the kind of thing he's looking to back, but we need to polish the presentation first. I'll help clean it up. Mind if I forward him some of your notes? Just a teaser." I hesitated. "You think it's ready?" "Jack, trust me," Greg said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We're in this together. We'll present it as a team. We could both be looking at major promotions here." That night, I stayed even later, rewriting code, refining the pitch deck. Greg had forwarded my designs to Dr. Adler, his mentor and a notoriously hard-to-impress investor. My name was on the first slide. Greg's was on the second. 3 days later, I saw the company calendar update. Adler presentation. Friday, 10 a.m. I wasn't invited. I asked Greg about it. "It's just a pre-brief," he said casually, barely looking up from his phone. "I'll walk him through the basics. We'll bring you in for the tech deep dive after that." I didn't like it, but I convinced myself to stay calm. Greg had always been supportive. We were a team. Friday came and went. No update from Greg, no mention of Adler. On Monday, my wife found me staring at the kitchen table, silent. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. I shook my head. "Greg didn't mention anything about the presentation?" She frowned. "Are you sure he's not taking credit for your work?" I laughed, but it came out hollow. He's not that kind of guy. But the seed of doubt was planted. That afternoon, I walked past the conference room just in time to hear laughter. Through the glass, I saw Greg, Adler, and 2 execs. On the screen behind them was my design. My name was nowhere in sight. I froze. Then I turned and walked away. At home that night, I barely touched my dinner. "You should talk to HR," my wife said. "I can't prove anything," I muttered. A day later, I finally got access to the file Greg had submitted for internal patent application. It had one author, Greg Dawson. My hands shook as I clicked through the document. Everything, every line of code, every diagram was mine. I couldn't breathe. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I took my daughter to the park. We fed ducks. She raced other kids on the grass. And for the first time in weeks, I laughed. I let myself forget Greg. But peace has a short half-life. That night, I checked my email. A thread between Greg and Adler had been left open on the shared company cloud folder, probably by mistake. One line burned itself into my memory. His name is off the paperwork now. We just need to keep the kid quiet. The office was quieter than usual, or maybe it just felt that way. I walked past Greg's glass-walled corner office, trying to ignore the smirk he gave me. I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. But that didn't mean I wasn't watching. Back at my desk, I opened the company's internal project tracker. The IoT energy-saving module, my invention, was now listed under a new initiative, Project Lumina. The contact person, Greg Dawson. I wasn't even a contributor. I scrolled further. Attached to the project folder was a document labeled Preliminary Licensing Terms. My heart pounded as I opened it. Buried on page 3 was the kicker. Exclusive rights proposal to a firm in California. 7 figures. Up front. So it was true. He wasn't just stealing my work. He was preparing to sell it. I spent the next 2 hours digging through internal folders, meeting notes, and Slack threads. Most of the real planning had been kept off the grid, but Greg had left crumbs, and I wasn't the only one who noticed. That afternoon, an anonymous message popped into my inbox. No sender, no subject, just one sentence. You're not the first, you won't be the last. Attached was a screenshot of an older project. Different department, same outcome. Original creator credited internally, then replaced on the final patent by Greg. My skin prickled. I clicked on the sender's address. Spoofed. No way to trace it. But it was enough to confirm my instincts. I wasn't alone. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My wife was asleep beside me. My daughter's nightlight blinked faintly under the door. Part of me wanted to burn everything down, to out Greg publicly, drag him through the mud. But another part, the engineer in me, knew. Emotion makes noise. Strategy gets results. In the morning, I walked into the office, nodding politely at Greg like nothing had happened. Then I downloaded a copy of the licensing agreement and copied it to my private drive. Buried in the legal jargon was something that made my stomach drop. The licensing firm, Nova Holdings, wasn't just a buyer. It was partially owned by Adler Capital, a shell group. I ran a quick business registry check. Adler Capital's board included a familiar name, Dr. Joseph Adler, Greg's mentor. He hadn't just pitched my work to his mentor. They were planning to own it, together. The betrayal was deeper than I imagined. I felt cold, not angry, just cold. Later that day, I called in a favor. An old classmate of mine worked at Rextech, one of our biggest competitors. We met after hours in a coffee shop downtown. I need to talk off the record, I said. She raised an eyebrow. This is about Lumina, isn't it? I nodded. She leaned in. Look, we've heard whispers. The tech's impressive. But if you're thinking of jumping ship, I hope you've got your IP in order. I handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a certified patent application, under my name, filed before the company submission. I hadn't told anyone, not even Greg, just in case. She whistled low. Damn, Jack, that's clean. What do you want? Buy it, take it, use it. Just keep it out of their hands. She looked uncomfortable. We can't. Not yet. Too messy. But we know people. There's a group, quiet, smart, angry. People like you. They're watching the same game. And they're tired of it. She handed me a card. No name. just a number. That night, I sat at the kitchen table fixing the wheels on my daughter's toy truck. She stood beside me, handing me screws, eyes wide with admiration. I smiled more than I had in weeks. When she went to bed, I called the number. A man answered. "You were referred?" "Yes," I said. "They stole from me." His voice was calm. "Welcome to Inventor's Redemption." By the end of the week, I was part of a private forum with engineers, scientists, coders, all with the same scar: stolen innovation. Some had fought back. Some had failed. But all of them were planning. I uploaded my documents, dates, proof, email screenshots. They welcomed me with silence, the kind of silence that says, "We see you." At work, Greg began acting twitchy. He avoided eye contact, stayed off the Slack channels, whispered in hallways. Then one morning, he received an anonymous message. I saw it flash across his screen as I walked by. It read, "Watch your back. Jack's not as quiet as you think. The plan was simple, but the stakes were anything but." I'd embedded a time-triggered email in my draft folder, an automatic forward packed with documents, code history, and voice recordings. The moment Greg went public with the product launch, the email would detonate, CC'd to the company's legal department, BCC'd to 3 journalists who'd been chasing a story on intellectual property theft in tech firms. All I had to do now was wait. Greg didn't. He called me into his office that afternoon, smiling like we were still teammates. "Jack," he began, tone friendly, eyes calculating. "Let's be real. You're not happy with how this played out." I stared at him. He leaned back. "Look, I get it. You did a lot of the groundwork. But this is how the industry works. It's not about who codes the first line. It's about who closes the deal. And I'm about to close a big one." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. A proposed agreement, revenue sharing. You stay quiet, we both profit. Handsomely. I didn't touch the paper. "You stole my name," I said calmly. "You sold my future." Greg shrugged. "I streamlined your future. Without me, your brilliant idea would be sitting on a hard drive. With me, it's a 7-figure product." I stood. "Then enjoy it while you can." His smile faltered. That night, I received a message from the Inventors Redemption Group. One of them had traced back a purge request issued to the company's IT server. The initiator, Dr. Joseph Adler. Adler was wiping everything: email chains, submission timestamps, even internal chat logs. He wasn't cleaning house. He was destroying fingerprints. But he hadn't touched my external archive. The next morning was the big reveal. The boardroom was dressed for celebration. Investors flew in. Marketing had prepared press kits. Greg stood at the front, exuding charm and confidence, about to claim the crown. I sat at the back, quiet. When the screen lit up, something went wrong. Instead of the polished promo video, the projection displayed a raw file explorer. One click, another. Suddenly folders popped open. Jack M. patent timestamps, Greg doc rewrites, Adler deletion logs. Someone had swapped the files. Greg froze. A murmur swept the room. I didn't move. By the time security pulled the feed, the damage was done. The screen had shown everything. Dates, edits, cover-ups, names. Greg looked like he'd seen a ghost. By noon, he was suspended pending investigation. HR launched an internal audit. The patent submission was deemed fraudulent. I watched from a distance as he tried to spin the story, claimed misunderstanding, technical error, team miscommunication. No one bought it. By the end of the day, an article hit the tech blogs. Whistleblower exposes theft inside top IoT firm. It didn't mention my name. That was intentional. What no one knew yet, not even Greg, was that the leak didn't come from me. It came from Adler's mentor. I received the message later that evening. A private inbox within Inventor's Redemption lit up. Sometimes you need to cut the head off the snake. Consider this a favor. Attached was a voice recording. Adler, Greg, and a third man plotting the license deal, laughing at how easy it was to override the engineer. The voice of the third man matched a lecture I once attended in grad school. Professor Henry Klein, Adler's former mentor and a titan in the IP ethics community. He'd flipped. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. Power shifts were rarely personal. They were strategic. Later that week, a journalist contacted me for comment. I declined. Let the facts speak for themselves. I didn't want a spotlight. I wanted closure. Still, the silence became heavy. One evening, I met an old friend for coffee. Sarah, now an IP attorney with a fierce reputation. "You did the hard part," she said after I recounted the story. "Now do the smart part." I raised an eyebrow. Speak, not to destroy, but to teach. Tell people how to protect themselves. Otherwise, they'll keep getting eaten alive. I nodded slowly. I'll think about it. When I got home, my inbox was waiting. A message from the National Patent Integrity Commission. Subject, urgent, scheduled review. Body, Mr. Miller, we need to speak. Your case may have broader implications. Please respond immediately. Greg's name disappeared from the org chart overnight. His office emptied within hours, save for a lone cardboard box someone had left behind. I didn't expect to hear from him again. But 3 days later, an email slipped into my inbox. Subject line, "I'm sorry." No signature, no defensiveness. Just a few paragraphs, more honest than I thought him capable of. He admitted it. Everything, from copying my designs to working with Adler behind closed doors. But the part that hit hardest wasn't the confession, it was the fear. "I didn't plan any of it," he wrote. "I was recruited, used, told I was the face they needed, the clean image. They said I could either play along or be replaced. I chose wrong." He said Adler had a habit of burning bridges and scapegoating his protégés. Greg was just the latest to fall for the illusion of mentorship, the kind that feeds on ambition and spits out obedience. I read the email twice, then closed my laptop without replying. The next morning, tech blogs ran headlines about me. Not by name, but by persona. The ghost inventor. A nameless engineer who'd outwitted corporate theft and exposed an intellectual property ring from the inside. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt disconnected. People were turning me into a symbol, a story, a warning. But none of them knew what it cost to stay quiet while your identity was erased, or what it felt like to smile at your daughter while your career unraveled behind your eyes. That night, we sat on the floor, surrounded by scattered Lego bricks. She wanted to build a city. I followed her lead. Small houses, crooked towers, too many windows on one side. She looked up. "Why does your building keep falling over?" I laughed. "Maybe it needs a stronger base." She tilted her head. "Can't you just start again?" I paused, then nodded. "Yeah, maybe it'll be better this time." The next few days blurred. Adler's name began circulating beyond tech media. A federal investigation was underway, pulling strings that stretched into foreign subsidiaries, ghost companies, forged patents. And then, the twist I never saw coming. During a late-night scroll, I came across a statement by one of the company's lead investors, Margot Langley, a venture capitalist known for her brutal honesty and surgical investments. She revealed she had invested not to back Adler, but to catch him. I suspected IP theft patterns years ago, she said. I needed to see it up close. Jack Miller's case wasn't the first, but it was the first we could prove. She published partial evidence, internal memos, manipulated timestamp data, NDA breaches. It painted Adler not as a genius leader, but a serial extractor of innovation. The walls were closing in. Rextech, the competitor I'd once approached, issued a statement the same week, praising whistleblowers and hinting at a new ethics division. I knew who wrote that press release, and I knew who inspired it. Meanwhile, Adler's face was suddenly everywhere. CNN panels, tech expos, congressional forecasts, not as a guest, as a warning. The morning I received the letter was strangely quiet. I was making pancakes when my wife handed it to me. Heavy envelope, embossed seal. Inside, a formal summons from the National Patent Integrity Commission. They wanted me to testify, not just in a private setting, but publicly, on record, before Congress. It didn't say why, but it didn't have to. The patent theft ring stretched wider than anyone admitted. My story was no longer just mine. I stared at the letter, then looked across the kitchen. My daughter was coloring on the floor, unaware that her father might be standing in front of the country in a matter of weeks. I wondered what she'd think. I wondered if I'd have the courage, because this wasn't just about retaliation anymore. This was about rewriting the rules. The knock on my door came just past 9. I was expecting a courier, maybe another government envelope. But when I opened it, Joseph Adler stood there, alone, his coat damp from the rain. "I won't stay long," he said quietly. He looked thinner, older, like the public exposure had shaved years off his face. I stepped aside without a word, and we sat across from each other at my kitchen table. The same table where I had once tried to convince myself not to fight back. "I didn't come to beg," Adler began. "But I need to say this to someone who understands." I waited. "There's a network," he said. "Not just one company, not just one firm. They move ideas like currency, strip names off innovations, and repackage them as products. It's not even about the tech anymore. It's about control." His voice shook, not with fear, but with a strange kind of exhaustion. I was part of it, and at some point, I started believing the ends justified the means. I didn't interrupt. I wanted to hate him. I thought I would. Then he added, "My brother was a physicist. Brilliant. Died by suicide after his research was stolen and his career ruined. No one stood up for him, not even me. I was afraid." He looked up, eyes glassy. That's when I changed. I decided I'd never be powerless again. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a hard drive, placing it on the table between us. "It's all there. Everything. The emails, the contracts, the meetings. If you're going to testify, you'll need more than just your story." I stared at the device. "Why give this to me?" "Because you already chose the hard road," he said, "and maybe it's time someone else did too." He stood up, hesitated, then added, "You don't owe me anything, Jack. But if this helps stop them, then maybe it'll mean I didn't waste everything." He left without another word. Later that night, I found myself sitting beside my daughter as she arranged her stuffed animals in a neat row across her bed. "Why do they always sit in the same order?" I asked. She shrugged. "Because that's the only way they all fit." I thought of Adler's story, of people like Greg, like me. Square pegs forced into round holes just to survive. "Hey," I said softly, "do you know what makes someone strong?" She blinked. Lifting heavy stuff? I smiled. Sometimes, but other times it's doing the right thing, even when no one's watching. She nodded, half understanding, and nestled into the covers. Dad, she whispered before drifting off. You're not going to let the bad guys win, right? I kissed her forehead. Not this time. The next morning, I opened the drive. What I found made my hands go cold. Internal memos marked confidential, financial trails linking shell companies to board members I recognized from tech summits. CEO names, venture capitalists, lobbyists. Some of the people listed were celebrated as champions of innovation. Others were still teaching. I contacted Inventors Redemption. Within hours, the files were encrypted and distributed across a dozen legal watchdogs and journalist networks. The group had gone quiet, but not inactive. They had prepared for this moment. The official announcement came 1 week later. Inventors Redemption was now a registered nonprofit. Mission: protect and defend creative professionals against exploitation. Pro bono legal counsel, IP education, a digital vault for innovators to timestamp their ideas securely. They offered me a seat on the board. I declined. I told them I wasn't done yet. Instead, I worked with a team to prepare for my testimony. We mapped the connections, highlighted the key players, built timelines. The night before the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror rehearsing my opening line, not as a victim, not as a ghost, but as a man choosing to be seen. Before bed, I sat with my wife on the porch. She held my hand without speaking. "Do you think it's worth it?" I asked. She looked at me. "You already know it is." As I closed my eyes that night, I remembered Adler's face, the hard drive, the trembling voice. He had started this war for power, but maybe, just maybe, I could help end it with truth. The sign above the door read, "Guardian of Geniuses." It wasn't flashy, just black letters on brushed steel. But to me, it meant something real. A promise that no idea, no matter how small or strange, would go unheard again. I launched the center 6 months after the hearing. Not as a business, but as a sanctuary. We offered guidance, patent education, legal resources. Mostly, we listened. That was the part most people never got. Creators don't just need protection. They need someone to believe them when they say, "I made this." Every Friday, we hosted an open lab. Young inventors, retired engineers, high schoolers who couldn't afford formal mentorship. We gave them tools, a voice, space. It was during one of those sessions that I noticed a boy, 16, maybe 17, working in the corner, quietly assembling a drone prototype from scrap. I walked over and asked his name. "Ethan," he said, not looking up. "Nice build," I offered. "You here with anyone?" He hesitated. "My dad dropped me off." I nodded, watching his hands. They moved like they'd been doing this for years. Later, one of my staff pulled me aside. "That's Greg Dawson's son." The name landed soft but heavy. I looked back at Ethan. I didn't see his father. I saw a kid who wanted to build. I left him alone. A week later, my daughter invited me to her class's career day. I almost said no. Public speaking had become routine. But performing for first graders was another level of pressure entirely. When it was her turn to introduce me, she stood proudly at the front of the room and said, "My dad helps protect dreams. He makes sure no one steals them." That was the first time I cried in public. That night, as I packed up some donation kits for rural schools, I got a message from an unknown number. A startup in Southeast Asia had reached out through our encrypted platform. They were being threatened by a local investor trying to seize their biometric sensor patent. They'd heard about me. It wasn't over. Not yet. I closed the message, took a breath, and started a new file. Another case. Another fight. Weeks passed. Then months. Things changed quietly, but meaningfully. My former company didn't survive the storm. What was left of it was bought out by an ethics-first innovation fund. The name was retired. The leadership stripped. They offered to bring me back as a consultant. I declined. I didn't need to walk the same halls again. Adler was sentenced in federal court. Wire fraud, conspiracy, tampering. His team fell with him. But he sent me something from prison. A book, bound in black leather with a short note inside. Thank you for forcing me to see the man I'd become. I didn't reply, but I didn't throw it away either. In late spring, I received a letter from the Global Institute of Innovation. I'd been nominated for the Genesis Award, one of the most prestigious recognitions for contributions to ethical technology. I sat with the envelope for 3 days before replying. I turned it down. The center didn't need me to be a face on a stage. It needed me at the table with a soldering iron, a broken circuit, and a student who thought maybe, just maybe, what they built could matter. One night, after the lab had closed and the lights dimmed, I sat beside my daughter on the living room rug. She was flipping through a picture book about explorers and inventors. When she looked up, I saw the question before she asked it. Did you win? I smiled. What do you mean? The bad guys. Did you beat them? I considered that. Sometimes, I said, winning isn't about beating someone. It's about not letting them change who you are. She leaned against me, warm and quiet. Can I be an inventor too? I kissed her hair. You already are. We sat there, the two of us, surrounded by pieces of stories and circuits and cardboard castles. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just me. And that was enough.